I opened the door and hopped into the truck and said, "Thanks, mate." And he said, "What the hell do you think you're doing, boy?" And I said, "Well, I'm standing by the road wanting a lift, and you stopped."
You're watching the Spotlight Network. Starring Hollywood's newsman, Logan Crawford.
They now believe a single member.
He works with TV and film legends. And now, Logan's shining the spotlight on the world's top emerging authors and creators.
International were abducted.
This is Spotlight with Logan Crawford. Streaming on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV.
I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on the Spotlight Network, we're sharing the extraordinary story of John Burgess, a man whose life took him from the rugged farmlands of New Zealand to the pinnacle of Australia's meat export industry. He's got a brilliant memoir out there. It is called Life, Luck, and Lessons Learned. In it, he blends humor, insight, and heartfelt reflection as he charts a journey shaped by risk, resilience, and global adventure. It's an inspiring tale of hard-earned success, cultural insight, and the surprising turns of fate that define his life, which is a life well lived. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Prime 7 Media for helping us put him on the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel, by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. John, so good to have you back on the show. Welcome, my friend.
It's very good to see you again, too. I actually have been looking forward to this because it's my chance, I feel, at the moment, particularly, to get my story still across where it's very, in my mind, necessary to let the public know what is out there.
Absolutely. Well, we're glad to have you back on the show. You're such an entertaining guest with so much insight and such an interesting life. Let's turn the clock back a little bit. Let's talk about your arrival in London back in the swinging 60s, as they're called. What was that like when you first arrived in London?
It was exceptional to the extent is that from farm boy to centre of London, Soho, is a world apart. Fortunately, in London, my sister was living. So when I arrived, I had a place to at least put my head down on the sofa because she was able to help me get started finding a place to live. However, big surprise was that when I put on my very new suit, bought as farm boy for the occasion, I found that nobody knew about me in London. And yet I'd been invited to go to London by the English directors of the New Zealand company. And when I met them, they said that come to London, we have a job for you. Got to London, nobody had heard of me. Nobody knew about anything.
Wow.
What to do? Well, being somebody who had in his working life to date had to use his initiative, I went up to the North Circular Road, which goes around London, and I stood beside the road at a traffic light, and a big truck, a big Guinness Breweries truck pulled up, tanker, huge. I was standing by the traffic light, which had turned red, and I opened the door and hopped into the truck and said, "Thanks, mate." And he said, "What the hell do you think you're doing, boy?" And I said, "Well, I'm standing by the road wanting a lift, and you stopped." And with that, the light changed. Cars behind started to toot their horns. So he had to put the truck into gear and off we set. And he said to me, "Where you going, lad?" And I said, "Where you going?" And he said, "Burton-on-Trent." I said, "I'm going to Burton-on-Trent." I had no idea where it was, but long as we were heading north, I was right, because I wanted to get to Scotland, go around Scotland, then to Wales, go around Wales, and then back to London, because the director I was meant to see and meet had been on holidays when I arrived. And that is why nobody knew or expected me. And he'd never told them that he'd made an offer to me for a job in London. So very quickly, within 2 weeks, we were back in London. And I went into the office and asked to meet one Mr. Sorrell, who was the director at that time, who I had met. I met him, and I met his senior, Mr. Denny, and Mr. Denny family owned the company. So he said, "Right," and he was in the spot, and he said, "We have a coal store in Liverpool." And he said, "You can go up there, and there's some jobs and work for you in Liverpool." Now, that was just as the Beatles were forming. So it was swinging London. And on London to Liverpool, Liverpool was quite a change, because it's really a more industrial place, although a massive port, of course. And our meat and sheep and mutton from New Zealand was being shipped from New Zealand to the Port of London. And so off I set for Liverpool, caught the train that next morning. And in Liverpool, I met the coal store manager, and he said that there was a job for me working on the bandsaw, cutting up the frozen mutton carcasses, so that they had a sausage making company that they wanted to take the forequarter meat to put into their sausages. They were left with the legs, and that my job was to find a buyer for the legs. And that was my first job in London.
Amazing, amazing. Talking about getting your hands dirty, that was quite a job. Amazing. No one would believe that was the start of a very successful career, but I guess it's the sense of adventure you had and the sense that you would do anything necessary to succeed is the type of perseverance that you need to make it, I guess, right?
Well, I not just so much had ambition as wanting to live and see life. And I had done, as you know from our previous discussion, I had 2 years sailing on an American yacht right up through Southeast Asia and up through the Pacific Islands. Right. So the sense of adventure is the nature of the beast a little bit. And the other thing is that, I was lucky enough to get a private school education, which made me learn to be disciplined. And that starts your life very early if you're put on the right track, helps you carry that on through in the life that you live from there on.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's talk about your move to Montreal, Canada. You came at a very turbulent time. Tell us about that.
Well, what happened, can I just make the entree that actually, before I arrived in Canada, I had decided to work for another company in England. And that company, in turn, when I worked for another company, I apologize. I worked for another company in England. Yes. And there, that company became the biggest company in Britain on meat import and exporting. Now, in turn, while I was there, I decided to leave and joined an American company because the big markets in the world are really governed by what the Americans do, as we know. So I got offered a job by one Harry Weinstein, and Harry was Jewish, obviously, and he had the most dashing set of gold teeth you've ever seen, inlays, of course. And when he smiled, he was known as the Aurora Borealis. But Harry was a very adventurous man, and he wanted somebody to sell his American meat in across Europe. And he thought I might be the man. And that led me with Harry. Now, with Harry, I couldn't get a green card to work in America straight away. So I said to Harry, I should really go and visit your clients across Europe, your established clients, and then find new clients as well, and check that your agents are doing the job that you're paying them to do. He said, go for it, son. So I was still young, obviously, and off I went, and I traveled right around Europe for 2 months. And I visited every East and Western market right across Europe. And I got back to London, and then Harry said, look, you can't get the green card. I think we better part and part as friends. And so that's then why I turned and felt I still wanted to be in North America and went to Canada. And this Canadian experience was not a very good one. At the time, there was what was called the FLQ, Fédération Libération Québécoise, and it was the French were trying to get their independence for Quebec, and I found it very difficult to do business. I found it very difficult to communicate because everybody in Montreal seemed to want to speak what we called pepper French, and it's a French dialect or accent that's been developed from the working class people that immigrated there from various parts of France. And so you can't speak good French, shall we say, classic French, because nobody understands it.
Right.
So this is very awkward indeed. And so my time I spent 1 year there, and I struck 3 blizzards. I had days that my car was covered in snow. I couldn't move it. Now, just a little story there. I was asked what car I wanted. I said I wanted a Ford Mustang. So I had the latest on wheels. So he was a young man. I did have a wife. I had no children, a Mustang, and the nightlife in Montreal today and then is fabulous.
Wonderful, wonderful. I don't know if the Mustang's the right car for Montreal, though, with all that snow. You might skid around a little bit, but certainly you looked great in it and had fun in it, I'm sure, without a doubt. Talk to us about your move to Australia. That's when you put on the hat as a business owner and entrepreneur. You set up an office in Sydney. Tell us about that.
Well, when I found that the job was not going according to plan in Montreal, I went back to New Zealand, and I had a week there, left my wife there because I didn't want to stay in New Zealand. I went to New Zealand and left my wife there, and then proceeded to Sydney. And I'd been in Sydney previously, and I liked the feel of Sydney. So I started my own business from scratch. Just me, a friend who was a very successful meat importer in Sweden, had an office in Sydney, and he said I could use it rent-free. So there was a start. Next thing is I had to get a meat export license, And that I went and I saw what was called in those days the Australian Meat Board about getting a license. They said I could only get a license once I had proved that I knew how to export meat. So I said, right. So I started. So for best part of a month, I sold meat from Australia through to Canada. Beg your pardon. Sold meat, to Canada, not only Canada, to all my other international clients. And in turn, after a period of time, the record now as a meat exporter, I went back to see the manager of the meat board, and he said, "What? You've been exporting meat without a license?" I said, "You told me I had to go and prove my credentials." He said, "No." He said, "All I'd asked you was to bring me something to prove that you understood how meat export industry operated." He said, "Here's your license." So I said, "Right, now I want a livestock export license too." So he said, "Here's one of those as well." So I had both my licenses. I was underway. But of course, the big problem is money. And we're talking big money. And I had diddly squat. I had very little. So I had to try and build a business using the faith and goodwill of the people that were supplying the meat to me, that I was going to meet their bills and their accounts. So it was quite a challenge.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Talk to us about when you became a partner in a subsidiary of a large publicly registered meat production company and you set up the export division there.
Well, that arrived because of a previous experience still in Sydney, where a company approached me and said they would like to buy my company. I said, "Well, it's not for sale." They said, "Well, what about 50%? So I did a deal with them, which gave me money. And in turn, they were the biggest exporter from Australia of what we call grinding beef, which goes into all the hamburgers, McDonald's and so forth. And it's a huge industry. There's over 300,000 tons of meat that are exported from Australia every year to America for this purpose. And so I aligned myself with them, and they were funding me on the basis that they had first option to buy the meat that didn't go to America. I couldn't compete with them. They had that part of the market was huge. And in turn, what happened was that the Iranians decided that they needed Australian meat, and they appointed a single agent. I went to see them because the people that were funding me had connections where they introduced me to the Minister of Agriculture in Tehran. So I had to go to Tehran to then set up or try to set up this big deal. It was huge. And in turn, what happened was the company that had sent me or agreed to pay, of which me, was running out of funds. Now, if you're not paying your bills, you're in trouble. As you know, it doesn't matter what your business is. So what they did in turn, they bailed out and they left me stranded. So there I was, no job, no partner. Well, I would say no money, but not enough money to fund this huge business that I was now operating. Right. And so this is where you asked me what happened. I then went and saw an elderly Jewish gentleman who I had known through my meat trading. And he said, right, he said, I will fund you up to $500,000, and anything you need more than me, from me, he said, we must discuss. So I suddenly had a financier. And over the next 3 years, working with him and his backing, I built up to be the biggest meat exporter out of that region. But not only that, the on the way to becoming the third biggest meat exporter out of the whole of Australia. And the progress obviously took years. After 3 years, I decided that I would really like to go back into my own business. And I had put money aside. I'd paid off all my debts. I was a free agent. And my wife supported me to the extent of agreeing that, yes, you've got that nature. Nobody's going to stop you. So from that point on, I spent the next good number of years, building up the business to the tune of we were exporting well over $100 million a year.
Amazing. Amazing. And how long did you stay in that business? And that was set up in Sydney?
Yes, in Sydney. I stayed about 10 years. I finished up with 40 staff, offices in all major states, agents all around the globe. And my business was getting not unwieldy, but again, underfunded. Even at that rate, where do you get the money to trade? And unless you've got the finance, and unless you're paying your bills on time, as I mentioned earlier, you're in trouble. So I then decided that I would approach a large company in Sweden, and that company had said that they wanted to set up a business in Australia, and I thought I could blend my business in with them. They knew me well. I traded with them for years, and we were good friends. But when I went out to Sweden, I got speaking to some of the other big entities there, the big cooperatives, and they were very interested also in perhaps purchasing my company. So eventually I thought, well, here I am. I'm selling the crown jewels, really. Once you sell it, what's your best, asset? You can't sell it twice. And in turn, I went back to Australia, and they said I got approached by a very big farmers cooperative, and they said that they would like to purchase the company. So now I had people overseas looking to buy my company, and also I had an Australian large farmers cooperative looking to buy my company. So I had a little bit of, shall we say, not only skin in the game, but a little bit of leverage. And you can be greedy and kill a deal. So I settled for what I thought was a fair price, and it gave me an exit. But they said to me I had to be their business development manager for 2 years. The reason for that was they didn't want to buy the company and then find there were a lot of rabbit holes, and there were debts owed and so forth that hadn't been declared. Now, that wasn't the case, of course, because John Burgess, the honest trader, the honest broker, I didn't work that way. But, of course, they just wanted to check. So for the next 2 years, 2 years, I worked as business development manager for one of the biggest farming cooperatives in the country.
Amazing. When you look back on the decades of your life, sailing, living on a farm, building huge businesses, partnering in other businesses, what's the favorite episode? What stands out to you? Like, I wish I could do that again. Is it the sailing? Is it being back on the farm? Is it I don't know. What would you say is the best part you'd like to maybe even redo and relive again because it was such an adventure?
Well, I think the most worthwhile part of it is through the friends you make.
Hmm.
Now, in business, sometimes it's said there's no such thing as good friends. It's business is business. And if you read particularly about the development of your own country, it's very ruthless. But
Right.
in my case, I wasn't so much ruthless as trying to be trustworthy. Now, the biggest thrills I think I found was bringing friends to the table
Mm.
so that we could share amongst friends the successes. And in that way, I am still friends with those that are fortunate enough to still be alive. And that I think is the greatest win that I had.
Wonderful, wonderful. And it sounds like you got a lot of support at home, which was very, very helpful to you as well, I'd imagine.
Well, my wife was working for when I was in London. She is a Kiwi like me. We're both from New Zealand. But my wife had gone to London as an 18-year-old young lady
Mhm.
to stay with her sister, who was living in London at the time.
Mhm.
And I met my wife, and she became. We travelled a lot together. We circumnavigated Ireland and visited every abattoir and bacon factory and so forth together. So she was indoctrinated a little bit, but she was also the secretary to the chairman of Swift and Company, which you may well know is one of the biggest American meat companies
Yep.
ever. Huge. And so she was the PA, the personal assistant. So she had a very good handle, you might say, on the meat industry and how it works from a secretarial point of view.
Mm.
So we made quite a good team, and that team exists today.
Yeah.
As you know,
Yeah.
helped me do my homework before I had a chat with you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, this is such a compelling book. What do you hope readers take away after they turn that last page? What do you hope they've learned? What do you hope they've learned about you? Maybe they've learned about themselves. Maybe they've learned about life.
If I could say this, you, whoever, if you believe in something, pursue it. Now, I have practiced that to the extent with my own children. Well, I'm very fortunate. My daughter is a graduate of Georgetown University, and she became a division director in American Express. My son became a senior executive in Macquarie Bank in Sydney. Now, they took my ethic, and that is honesty and effort,
Mm.
and for me, what do I take away? The thrill of passing on what I had learned to
Mm.
my family, who in turn now I have grandchildren, and they are seeking, because they are teenagers, they are seeking advice, which they come and ask me about, and that's absolutely the icing on the cake.
Absolutely, I'm sure. And a lot of people are going to be getting advice from you by reading this wonderful, wonderful book. It is called Life, Luck, and Lessons Learned, a global journey of great growth and gratitude. John, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
And thank you, and we hope maybe there is another book in the offing.
Well, I can't wait to read it, and I wish you lots of great luck in writing it. I'm sure there's many, many more chapters to write, so I'm looking forward to our next chat about that. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time, this time until next time on Spotlight.